On this episode of ResiWeek, we wrap up ISC 2020, Resideo acquires Herman Pro AV, and Sony rehires Jeff Goldstein. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 211, Joe's cell phone.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Chief, the global leader in commercial AV mounting solutions, and by
Atlona, the go-to provider for AV signal distribution and control in corporate, higher education, and residential spaces.
Welcome to ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, we are pleased to be joined by Jason Griffin. He is the director of partner development at One Vision Resources. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Then we have Josh Willis. He is the president at Portal.io. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for sending that email. And last but not least, we have Joe Whitaker. He is the CEO of Thoughtful Integrations. What's up, Joey?
Dude, glad to be back on the show.
It's been a while, man. It's actually been a minute for all three of you.
It's been like months. Yeah.
I know. It's crazy. The reason we've been so busy and we haven't had time to hang out is because the last month or so, I have been preparing for ISC, which none of you prepared for because you didn't go. But that doesn't mean we're not going to talk about it. So, gentlemen, this is a good wrap-up that comes to us from CE Pro and Arlen Schweger. He goes around the rye in essentially 30 tweets that he sent out from the show. If you missed it or somehow managed to be on any part of social media and not see the drama and the fun that surrounded ISC this year, there was, of course, a massive virus out of China that caused all kinds of drama there. There was weather that hit essentially Western Europe as well as the UK. It got me across the ocean in like 6 hours instead of the normal 7, which was fantastic. There were booth concerns. There were dancing robots that caused outrage, all kinds of stuff. So, Jason, let me kick this off with you. And again, none of you were there, so this is going to be very entertaining. But as someone who wasn't there, when you saw the coverage, when you kind of followed along, because this is a big show for our channel, did you find that all of the drama affected the outcome of the show in anything that you were able to perceive?
I would say no, not anything that I was able to perceive. I think for me, as a US-based residential integrator, ISC's always been a little bit of a difficult show to follow from afar. I was lucky enough to go over there once a couple of years ago and really enjoyed it, but I was there just that one time. And I think, this year was no exception. There's so much going on at ISC between Pro AV and commercial and residential that following it from afar can be a little bit of a challenge. But, everything I took away from it seemed like it was another great show. There was, in this story that you alluded to, around the rye in 30 tweets, I think it was a great roundup. Seems to be a lot of movement continuing. Noticed a lot of the big players in the residential side: Crestron, Snap AV, Nortec, Savant, of course Z-Wave, all had really strong showings. And so it appears to have been another successful show. I know that attendance counts, they expect to be down this year for the reasons you cited.
Way down,
in the
30,000 down.
Yeah, and so I did hear from people who were there that they could feel that. They could feel that on the show, that it was a little bit more lightly attended. But, from everything I could tell, it seems like it was another great show. The people I've talked to saw a lot of cool stuff there. And it looks like all of these companies are continuing to use it as a great opportunity to, continue to showcase their innovation.
Very good. And yes, they were down approximately 30,000 people, from last year. And while that was disappointing, it was excellent as far as navigating the show. It was a dream to get around this year. Josh, again, following it from this side of the pond, normally at ISC, we see a lot of big releases. We see a lot of big product releases. We're starting to, the last couple of years, see the same trend that we're noticing at Expo and even Infocom for that matter, where it's incremental release, right? We're seeing this incremental growth opposed to these massive chunks when it comes to product. Does that affect your desire to go to shows, to make the investment to do these things when products are upgraded with firmware a lot of times opposed to big flashy boxes?
I think most people don't go to the shows for the new products or the new announcements. I mean, we get new announcements every day. So, the shows are about the relationships. It's about seeing the people at the different companies. It's about seeing what they have new. But look, guys care about what they can actually install and sell, and not necessarily what's coming in 3 months or 6 months or whatever. So it's fun to know the technology that's coming soon, but guys are really there to do business. And so I don't really think that affects it too much.
Very good. Joey, I saved a fun one for you. You and I have talked for, probably 4 or 5 years now about you coming to ISC. It's never really happened. Is the value for residential dealers on the whole, you take your average integrator in North America, is it worth their time and their investment to go to ISC?
Well, yes and no. So since me and you have been talking about this, I haven't went. I personally haven't seen the value for one of several different things. Most of what I do want to see, I'll catch at CEDIA Expo. The last 4 years, I haven't really represented CEDIA in any capacity over at ISC. And then there's all, kind of what you're talking about, incremental product launches, the flashiness of the big announcement, that's been kind of dying at all shows for the last 5 or 6 years. So it's interesting to think of, why me personally didn't go. Value to my business. I could get that at ISC, Infocom, CES, or CEDIA Expo, locally for a lot less of the cost. And then for, a lot of us that have been doing this for a long time, ISC is the international Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool when we were going, to CES back in our 20s, but we're all pushing on 50 now. It's like, man, Barcelona now has a whole new, vibe to it. Now we got something new and something fresh. It's just like those places we've been to time and time and time again. You were just, talking about the attendance. It's one of those that I'm kind of glad I elected not to go this year. When you take into account 30,000 people down, right? To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire attendance at CEDIA Expo. That's walking into that building, and not only any members or attendees, there's no manufacturers. It would be ghost town. So, person-wise, put that into perspective. But it was very entertaining to watch vicariously through social media from people like Ryan over at SI, shooting pictures out the window of the craziness of the wind, LG not showing up because of the coronavirus. All these things were kind of fascinating in and of that was the final, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You always try to end an event, a final event, like on this super big, exciting high point. And then they just got pounded with the worst uncontrollable luck ever.
Oh, it was exciting. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, you can always plan for bad things to happen. I do not think that in this circumstance there was no way to plan for that just compiled junk that just hit them.
Aside from all of that stuff, I think, Joe, you could probably say if I'm right on this or not, but I suspect that, as a business owner, when you take time out of your schedule to go to a show like this, you can make it worth your time, right? You can figure out a way to make it worth your time. But when it's over there, you're losing a day of travel there. You're losing a day of travel back. I mean, I know when Cedia moved to San Diego, a lot of guys didn't go because that's a long flight to go from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so, I mean, that's really what it comes down to, I think, for most business owners is that's just a huge chunk of time.
I agree. And the last time I went, I think I was gone a total of a week and a half. So, put that into perspective. When you go to Cedia Expo here, your max time might be 4 days with travel. So I mean, it is very, very different. And, the mix of commercial, residential, high-end audio, and how big and huge it is, it does make the logistics of it all a little hard. The show is perfect for over there. If you are, a UK company or an India company, even for that reason, because they're such a concentration of populace. Over there, you can drive, from one country across 3 to 4 countries, and it's like driving across the state of Texas here. So, I mean, it's you have that big centralized populace, which makes shows like this make so much sense. It's like the strip of shows in China.
Yeah. Very good. Gentlemen, let's move on to our next story of the day. This was announced late last week, and it caught me off guard, caught most of the people I talked to off guard. Resideo, which I'm probably saying that incorrectly, but the holding company.
Resideo.
Thank you. Resideo has acquired Herman Pro AV. If you don't know Resideo, they own ADI Global Distribution, which is what makes this a very entertaining story. If you don't know Herman, they are a value-added distributor out of Florida, but they mainly work in the Pro AV market. Josh, I want to start with you on this one. This caught me off guard. As I said, this caught the majority of the people I've talked to off guard because ADI, although it is in our space, for the most part, it's really heavy on the security aspect, the life safety aspect. It's not, yes, they have residential integration products, but that's not the main gist of their business. And they're now going after the Pro AV side of the business with this acquisition of Herman. What does this look like to you?
So I found this one pretty interesting as well. And it's no secret that Resideo been on a little bit of an acquisition spree. I think it was in December that they acquired 3 software companies around monitoring. I think monitoring HVAC and climate in the house, water, and then a third one, which was appliances and the healthier appliances in the house. So they've been out there doing this. Now, I think there's 2 sort of ways to look at this. Number one is purely as a play into the pro channel. And so I think when you look at it that way, I don't think Herman does a ton of business on the Pro AV side in terms of as a distributor. Now, I think that I think that what's interesting about it is that you probably have Resideo looking at this as a way to get their services and their call centers and all of their security monitoring into the pro channel, because there's a huge opportunity for monitoring on the pro side. And then more interesting to me is that it was my understanding, now I didn't get to research this beforehand, but I know Peter Melvin over there at Herman. And when I met Peter, he ran their installation services division, and they farm out install labor to mostly pro dealers, but they also were pushing into the residential channel as well. And my understanding from the distribution side was the distribution side grew from the need that came out of them creating this labor force. And so I think what's more interesting about this acquisition is that ADI, a very large distributor with over 100 locations, now has access to a labor workforce. And so how that plays out seems like it's the more interesting angle for me.
Very good. And yeah, that's how I first came to know Herman, was through their labor force. Joe, when you look at this, taking kind of what Josh is saying and kind of pulling that thread, is this something where they're just purchasing Herman for potentially that label force or that foothold into Pro AV, because that's something that ADI has never done? Or is it a push from ADI's dealer base saying, hey, we need better access to some Pro AV products?
It's to me, it kind of does make a lot of sense when you look at the overall forecast of distribution acquisition. Like, you've seen Snap, you've seen this and the other, and, kind of on a level of quality, especially because what Josh just talked about the labor force is, I've often put them up there kind of in the higher echelon just because of the way they are and they functionally are, up there with the Volutones and Wally Winna's companies. And, I've always kind of seen them at a little bit of a higher level than your typicals, your ADIs, your Avids, your Waves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for people in the U.S. who dealt with ADI or still deal with ADI a lot, they know that there is a massive amount of Pro equipment there. One of our picking grounds is ADI for QSC, JBL. The list goes on and on and on. They have it. Some of our best prices for, Pro microphones, guess what? They come from ADI. So, they've been playing in that space for quite a while. They just don't have the reputation to support that business or, that installation model that also comes with that. So, what is the key to move more products? You have to have that name and that branding and that recognition. You've seen Snap do that with, AllNet, Volutone, and, all of these regions that help them move more in those areas. So you take that, you translate that into Florida. It's an obvious business win-win on all different levels, especially when those, macro distributors we know, the Avids, the ADIs, those guys are struggling to keep a foothold because of all of the consolidation of local and powerhouse and all those other distribution models. So I think it's more on the business aspect of we need to push more gear. We need a name behind it to do it. Here's a perfect opportunity because Florida is ripe with that kind of business.
Jason, is Joe on the right track? Is it just the acquisition, not just the acquisition for the name, but is the name going to just add credibility to it? Or is it that concentrated push? Because the interesting side for me is being up here, our ADI doesn't really play in Pro. They offer a lot in the catalog, but you're not likely going to find most of it there. Whereas in the States, it's a little bit more prevalent. Mm-hmm. Is it just that concentrated push? Or is this, again, just continuing to see these major distributors widen their berth?
Are they just buying them before Snap does, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Ultimately, I think it is an interesting story because if you go back and you look at the history of Resideo, they spun out of Honeywell. This was back in 2018, and it was under the explicit directive of smart home. So you go look at Resideo's webpage, and it's all about smart home. It's very, very smart home centric. Herman, of course, and ADI, as we've talked about, are very commercial centric. So to me, I think clearly there's overlap. It's not as if they're buying some distribution business that has nothing to do with the smart home. They are different segments of the market, as we all know. But I think if I had to guess, this is mostly about like footprint, infrastructure, locations, distribution. It's just having more, again, of that footprint, right? And the fact that they have traditionally sold professional gear, well, they can continue to do that. They can, assuming that's a healthy business, they probably will. They'll continue to get those revenues and that margin that comes from that. But I suspect you'll probably, over some period of time, start to see a shift in Herman into more smart home equipment. I'm not intimately familiar with their product mix, nor am I intimately familiar with ADI, frankly. But, again, Resideo's strategy is very, very smart home centric. That's what they're all about. And so the fact that they're rolling up companies suggests to me that, they see a lot of opportunity in the smart home. And I think that first and foremost, this acquisition is targeted at their main strategy of smart home. And they see enough synergy there that this makes sense.
Excellent. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to likely our last story of the day. A familiar face is back at Sony Electronics. Jeff Goldstein, who has spent 24 years at Sony, including several as the head of their consumer integrated systems channel, which is kind of our channel there. He's back in that role again. He left, if I remember correctly, back in 2013, and Frank Stearns took over. He recently left to go to Sound United. So Jeff is back in his old groove, shall we say. Joe, is this something that you find interesting? Jeff's been there for 24 years. He's held this role before. They parted ways for reasons that I don't know. I'm not sure if you do. I'm not sure if we care. But he's back in this same role. Sorry. Was that too much? It was a long time ago.
No, yeah, well, a long time ago in technology, not so much as in business.
No, but 7 years.
To me,
he's been gone for 7 years. Now that he's back, what does that mean?
So, when I saw this, I kind of got excited, and in my head, it was like, oh my God, Sony's putting the band back together. Because, I will never take away anything from Frank. Frank is amazing. I love Frank. Every company he's been at, he's done wonders. However, there was a time when there was this team. It wasn't just a guy, which was him. It was a team. I mean, you had a rock star team back when he was there of him, John Lynn, Amy Lloyd, Jason Savage, Kevin O'Loughlin. You had like the rock star team of people from all facets working within a company for the CI channel. Every single person understood the channel, understood what we needed in products. I mean, it was amazing. And then Sony went through a culture change. And the culture change is what, changed things for people like him and Amy Lloyd and Neil Manowitz and Aaron Levine. The culture change changed the way the employees and staff worked within Sony. So we saw like a year of dead. Like everybody remembers, there was a year of just dead. And then Frank came on a year later, things started picking back up. And then we come to today. See, now we're back with those leading products and all that, but the market is changing and shifting. And that's where I think his specialization is. I mean, to me, I'm not going to be surprised if we see some other team members return or some changes and some culture shift within the company, building back on that, that old crux of everybody that's there knows the industry, knows the way it works, and can push compelling products. That's my crystal ball. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. So to me, it's excited. I know the guy. I've seen what he can do personally. So yeah, to me, that's been the question. Who's going to replace Frank? Well, there we have it.
Jason, as much as I like where Joe's head is at on this one, part of me can't separate from this and go, this has got to be somewhat disconcerting to anyone a level below in this role, because they didn't hire from within. They literally just went and brought back the old guy who used to do this. Is that disconcerting, or am I off path on that one?
Really, really hard to say. I know Frank fairly well. I haven't gotten an opportunity to know Jeff, and so I don't know anything about his leadership style and what those, he's coming in to lead may think of the move. So I don't want to speculate on it. I think that reading the story, I'm excited. I think Sony is one of those companies. They're sort of a darling of the CI space, and I think for good reason. I think generally they do a great job of making great products, and they do a great job of considering the CI channel. And that's not something you can say for a lot of companies. We've seen over the last 5 to 6 years, more and more companies start to show up at Cedia who come at it from different markets, and they think, well, we'll just come into Cedia and we'll sell it through integrators, and we'll give them a little bit of, try to give them a little bit of margin, and it'll all be great. And it doesn't work that way. There's so much nuance involved in the CI channel that I think companies like Sony really putting organizational resources into place to focus on making sure that the CI channel is well taken care of is fantastic. I love it. And I think that, the thing that jumped out at me in the story is Jeff's experience in product development and planning. And that is such a huge component of this, because for any sort of offering to be successful in the CI channel, it really has to start all the way back at the product development. right? And so that I think is exciting for Sony as a company, and I think it should be exciting for Sony dealers as well.
Very good. Josh, I'll give you the last word on this. You were excited about this story when we talked pre-show ramble. Why did this bring out all the feels for you?
I don't know that I would say excited, but it's interesting to me. And it's kind of interesting to me because I look at this as a hire from within. He hasn't been removed enough to say that this is an outside hire versus an inside hire. So that's point number one. Point number two is that, when you're working, when you're running, for instance, the US and North America, and in CI, and your parent company is overseas, right? And there's a language barrier. There's a lot of very difficult things in terms of doing business, right? So I think that what Frank did, Sony is dominating the market right now, and they're dominating because of what Frank did at Sony. And what Frank did at Sony had nothing to do with the technical side, at least from my observations. It was all about the programs. Frank put the distribution into place. He set up all the programs, and Sony has the best programs. When Sony started dominating the market, I started asking integrators, why did you choose Sony over whatever else, including receivers? And the answer was, well, it's the programs. Custom installers sell one TV at a time, right? So when they can sell a TV and a receiver and it's free shipping, and they don't have to buy an extra TV to get the free shipping, which is astronomically expensive, they'll go with the better program. And so Frank put those together, and that was very difficult to do. And so now that that's been done, and now that Sony's on top, they're bringing Jeff in, who I believe his background is on the technical side, which Jason hinted at. So that should be exciting for all of the guys in the channel. Now, here's the thing. Sony's in a tight space. They're on the top of the mountain right now. But Samsung's got the frame, and LG's got some killer technology coming out. Both of those companies are really excited about this year. You've got Hisense and Epson coming out with this, the front projection, or the short throw projection technology. And Sony's got their projectors, but it's like Sony's always been a technology company, and it's starting to feel like Sony's slipping behind a little bit. And so I think that's a big reason why they chose Jeff to put him back in this role, is because he can help them refocus. Now that the programs are in place, all credit to Frank and his team, it's time to get the technology in place and catch up. And Sony being the technology company, they can do it, but they need to focus on it. And I think that's why they brought Jeff back.
Matt, can I add a reference to what he just said with Josh? Because Josh hit the nail right on the head. So for those on this podcast and those and listening and watching, one of the things to keep in mind about Jeff and what he was and what he does, he was running the show when Sony introduced their first 4K projector. Okay, the first home theater 4K projector, period. He was the first one to take a surround receiver. So he was the first one to actually implement Control4's platform into a third-party product natively. On the technical side, the guy is a genius. He introduced the AR and ES speakers. He was all about that technical aspect. And Josh has hit it on the head. We love the programs. Now let's get on tech.
All right. Very good, gentlemen. Let's leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Jason, if people want to connect with you, learn more about One Vision Resources, where can they do that?
Yeah, onevisionresources.com is the website for that. And I also do a weekly industry podcast at hometech.fm. So would love to have people go check that out.
Yeah, definitely check that out. Josh, thank you, sir, for joining us. If people want to connect with you, learn more about Portal.io, where can they do that?
They can do it on portal.io. We help dealers sell more faster, and they can email me at josh@portal.io.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Joe, my good friend, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Thoughtful Integrations, where can they do that?
They can always email me at joe@Thoughtful Integrations. Find us on Facebook, which is our most used platform, @Thoughtful Integrations, or you could call my cell. Just kidding. I'm not giving you my cell phone number. But you can also find me involved at programs and things at Cedia. And as always, sometimes here at ResiWeek.
Call me if you want his cell phone number, I'll
Yeah, I was
happily
going
give
to
it
say,
to you.
email me. Just send me an email.
Any
I'll
of
give you
us.
Joe's.
I think everyone on the show right now has my cell phone
We
number.
will
so-
give you his cell phone number, his home address, whatever you need. We got you. All right, gentlemen, thanks again for joining us and for spending some time with me. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott and pretty much every other social platform. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of our other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. When you're on the site, you can also see our ISE coverage under the ISE tab. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek. I will happily give out your cell phone.
Oh God.
We'll just give it to Mitchell to post on the page. Is that all right?
There you go.
Yeah, we'll tweet it out with the show.
Yeah, do that.